Right. Jake Porter and Zach Luther back for a mentor meeting. We're going to
Hey,
do
hey.
5.1 and 5.3 today. So let me share uh, 5.1 here. These are actually very similar. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but these are very
Okay,
similar assignments.
cool.
So can you say everything okay?
Uh, Not yet. And right now, I got it.
Okay. So this artifact, the idea was to there's a few questions here talking about relationships, classroom strategies, technology, things like that. So for this relationships part, I pretty much put most of the MA staff here, you, Miss K, Miss Hudson, Mr. Harris. Those are people that have been especially like um supportive for me. Um, some strategies that I've seen from you guys, that I've seen from just classwork is obviously differentiating instruction is very important. I really like to do the one-on-one. I feel like that works uh, for me.
Hmm.
Finding the right relationship one-on-one. With a few kids, I use the extrinsic motivation, like hot fries or basketball
Sure.
or whatever. Um,
I know. Yep.
yeah, but I feel like the differentiating was definitely something that we have to use a lot in our school, just because we have so many different kids.
I think more than any other place.
Yeah,
I think
it's
any
I
other
think
place,
there's a lot
like,
of places like MA.
yeah, you definitely have to differentiate more,
Yeah,
you know.
for sure.
Uh, I think sometimes you get caught in a few students that they always want to point the finger and be like, well, how come you did that for this person and
Hmm.
things like that.
Yeah,
And more than ever at MA, it's kind of everyone, even though not everyone has an IEP, it's almost like you kind of treat everyone kind of in with an individual plan.
yeah. Try to
Mm,
get them motivated. Some of them understand. Usually the older ones, they start to get why things are different for different
I
people
know.
as they mature a bit.
I know. It's the youngsters that just don't care.
Yeah,
Like they don't discriminate on age or unfortunately disabilities and things like that. It goes right out the window for them. And
they don't get it quite yet.
yeah, and you try to teach them and understand, and you try to teach them in like you especially try to teach them like when you're off directing to another student. When your attention's somewhere else and they're kind of listening in, but it's not directed towards them.
Hmm.
That's probably the best way to get to some of those middle school kids.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah. All right, you can continue. Sorry, I ranted there.
No, you're good. Good discussion. Um, for technological resources, we don't do a whole lot of that, I don't feel like, but I put here Edgenuity and iExcel because those are the two primary things that we use for the kids. But I feel like they were looking for more, um, maybe iReady would count for this, like technological
Um,
aids, things to support the kids. But really, I feel like Edgenuity and iExcel are the most prevalent of the
Ye-
technology we use.
Yeah, on the academic level, Edgenuity and iExcel, if they were looking right there, if you wanted to like add real quick, you probably type this in on the social side, social emotional side, and life skills guy would do capturing kids' hearts. That capturing kids' hearts is like kind of every morning group's kind of led by that. And then
Hmm.
let's see, the other one that we use is oh man, it's like you could say like Leadworthy is its own software inside that. So most kids do Leadworthy, but that's provided as well. Um, of course, there's a bunch that like. You were thinking on the academic side, which is very right. Of course, we do like the softwares that are like Kahoot,
Yeah.
Blooket, things like that. Like, those are as much as you don't want to turn everything into a game, it is very helpful for some
Yeah.
people. Kids tend to gravitate towards those types of games and stuff.
The Blooket is so instant gratification for me. I like the Kahoot where I can kind of see the question and the answer as we go
Yeah,
along. But the Blooket
yeah.
is just like really fast.
And Blooket is they can kind of cheat the system and click, 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 and still like play the game.
They really have to go.
Kahoot's
They just keep going.
Kahoot's great where you could just stop and talk.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like Kahoot. Um, so for this section, accommodations is what this one's talking about. Like how do I adjust instruction or assessment? And so for me, I did a lot of one-on-one this year. Um, and what I had the most success with is I would kind of feel out what the kids' needs were. Like we have some kids that are a bit more volatile, and so I would let them be volatile and not react and just kind of keep a calm demeanor and
Yeah,
kind of repeat what we were doing. And eventually that would get them to a point where we could work on what we were working on.
right,
Not
right.
every kid was successful with that method, but that was one uh, that I did have some success with.
Yeah, yeah. And gosh, I was just reading about this and now I can't think of the word, but it's literally like staying true with that one phrase and don't change your emotion to it. Like, if
Yeah,
it's like, uh, I don't know. They just called it something like that, but it's like even like they use it like a great parenting strategy is like staying firm with that one line, and that's the only line you say, right? And it's just even keel and it stays the whole time.
yeah. And I had a time where I was one-on-one with a kid in study hall and she was upset. And I was like, all right, look, we're gonna do something that's kind of silly, okay? And she was like still kind of mad. And I kind of talked her through some box breathing, but
Hmm.
I framed it in that way, like this is kind of silly, but we're gonna do it anyway. And I think that um that kind of opened her up to it a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And then we definitely saw with you probably know who I'm talking about, but as soon as we switched him from digital to more paperwork, just night and day. So that's definitely something I would keep an eye out for with future students is finding the right medium for their work because I know I would be so frustrated on the computer all day.
Definitely. Definitely.
And this last part talks about modifications, and we do that through Edgenuity, where we can adjust and uh, remove some things or bypass an assignment depending on where the kid's at progress wise.
Yeah, and in the IEP and the SPED world, remember you got to be very careful the difference between accommodations and modifications,
Hmm.
right? Modifications tend to be in the IEP world that you're changing their standards or curriculum,
Okay.
right? So it's typically modifications are used specifically for ID students. So with intellectual disabilities, where like they just, uh, you know. I want to say in a Maryville school system of what I've heard, and like this is just this district, is they say if like their IQ is below um like a working 70,
Hmm.
right? So that qualifies them for ID, but that's not every single place. So that's just Maryville specific. And that ID kind of gets them in that CDCA classroom, CDC classroom. And that's where modifications they'll change for them. Now, accommodations is what kind of some of the students that we deal with IEPs at Maryville Academy. We don't have any ID. I mean, I think we've had one in the past. Yeah. But um accommodations would be kind of like the extended times and goes down the list of like rest and breaks and things like that.
Yeah.
Um I would even say I would even say the accommodations of changing Edgenuity, like just cutting off one of the answers, so make it three answers. That's not changing the standard. That's more that's more just making an accommodation to cut down the answer choices. They're still trying to learn the same as a regular student, right? It's still the same question and it's still learning the same kind of skills.
Yeah.
So it'd be accommodation.
Okay.
Um, Modification. Even an accommodation would be like, um, they could churn in their missing assignments for like up to 9 weeks past, right? Like that doesn't change anything to the standards that they have to learn. So modifications would tend to be like you are literally like cutting this work from the standard of the program.
Mhm.
That would be a modification.
Okay.
So we have done that modifications at MA, but it's very rare we have a student that low, so to say. I think we've had one in the past, and I think you know who I'm talking about, but they're no longer with us.
Yeah.
So it's tricky, especially when you get to the tests and stuff. Like modifications are like you're
Strictly.
literally pulling from the curriculum. It's
Yeah.
gone.
Okay.
They're not going to learn that. So, hopefully that's a little helpful.
Yeah, no, that definitely was very helpful. I didn't
Mhm.
realize that there was such a strict difference between the two.
Yeah, you got to qualify for like very specific modifications or like one modification would it be we had a student that like really couldn't see well. You know who I'm talking about back in the day, like had to be super super close. So he was able you literally cut like any um like presentation work because you couldn't see.
Hmm.
Like he had paper versions in front of him with magnifiers and things like that, where his curriculum completely changed when it came to like that. He had like some speech class or whatever.
Yeah.
So he got cut kind of big modifications there. So,
Is that a case where like a modification would be like a read aloud or something like that? We could have
uh,
someone
so,
read through.
so read aloud is just offering a different learning style, but the same curriculum stays,
Hmm.
right? So read aloud is an accommodation.
Okay.
Um, like access to technology, right, during tests. Um, Pretty much everything that you've dealt with at MA, other than that one situation, has been an accommodation. Excuse me. Modifications tend to go into CDCA,
Hmm.
CDC, where they're just not going to learn the same material as their regular education peers.
Okay. Yeah. So that's strictly ID and like sped on like a higher category of sped. Like would that be like
Yeah.
a tier three?
Not even that. Like you're talking about like you'll see on their primary disability, like on their IEP would be intellectually disabled
Mm.
or ID. Um, of course, back in the day, well, I don't even want to say it's just ID for it's ID everywhere now. It's ID. But if they are ID, and typically they tend to look at like when it comes to that, like they really look at their IQ scores on that.
Hmm.
School psych, you'll definitely look at like their psych report and look at their IQ levels and they definitely tend to qualify when they're low on the
Yeah.
IQ score.
Okay.
They have to meet a certain number.
Is that something that like this was something I was working on the other day. They were saying that the IQ thing, they're kind of moving away from it. They're moving towards that RTI, I think it's RTI, uh, standard where they were trying to find a different method of measuring that because they were doing the IQ tests and like they were getting outliers with young boys. I
Ooh.
believe it was, were testing like the data was coming back like incorrect.
Ah,
And it was
so
a good
like
representation of their actual like intellectual ability at that point.
see, now you're getting into some things that I've been kind of like very iffy on throughout my career so far is like, Ames Web Plus is an intervention tool where they do the benchmarking, right? That's a software.
Yeah.
Before that, there was a software called Frontline. And I can promise you, like if I gave a Frontline test to a student and then like the next week I gave an Ames Web test to the same student, they'd be different scores.
Hmm.
So it really kind of depends on what software you're using for that intervention piece, right? It's very skewed in my opinion sometimes. Some of the assessments that they do, like like reading fluency, so to say, where you're just or like reading out loud, right? A kid could kill that, like blow it out of the water,
Mm.
right? But then when they get to like trying to comprehend that, right, eh, they struggle,
Yeah.
right? And then like a whole nother test on another software, they just have to do word recognition. So they choose three words out of a sentence and they count that as reading comprehension, which
Hmm.
isn't right. It's just them if they know the vocab of the word. It doesn't really take place of like, do they understand what the whole paragraph is saying? Like, could they
Yeah.
summarize it? So it's you got to be very ticky-tack and you kind of got to know the software and like what they're actually testing the kid because I like sometimes I disagree. Like, no, like, even though they did score well in this test, when we do an assignment in class, they do not know what's going on,
Yeah.
right?
They
On the
are good
on
at
the
taking the
flip
test.
on the flip side of that, I think what you're saying, um, I've had students that score super high on an IQ test. Like their verbal skills are really good and like they're talking to you one on one, and you feel like it's a great conversation. But then when they get into class, when it comes to any reading or math, right? Their IQ score, I mean, they should be in CDCA. They can't handle a normal class, in my opinion. But again, it goes back to like me and you aren't school psychologists. We don't determine those things.
Yeah.
That, but sometimes I feel like the school psychologist should ask us a little more what happens in the classroom because sometimes those IQ scores or those tests don't really add up to what we see in the classroom.
Yeah.
So I can argue about some of these situations all day. Like, yeah, this person's great when they're with the school psych and super personable and happy and talking. Then you put them in class and they can't handle that class, and that's kind of
Mm.
unfair, you know?
But you
You
kind of have to adhere to that least restrictive environment, don't you?
you always got to go back to that, but I think the great ones and the great systems, teamwork is very, very important.
Mhm.
The school psych kind of listens to what your feedback says. You listen to what the school psych says. You talk to multiple teachers. Those teachers give you honest answers. You know, it's a whole team thing. You can't just, last week, it's not just one thing that decides it. It's like kind of a good tight-knit group and a lot of testing and a lot of classroom observation.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll go ahead and end the first one.
Cool. You want to just